Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Ben at Bates Nursery, and it has been a really busy spring. We've had a really extreme winter, and we're getting into the warmer days, warmer weather, a little bit of a drought, a little bit of rain, and a lot of folks are needing a little bit of shade this time of year, and that's what we're talking about today. So we're excited for this summer and to see what comes, and setting yourself up for a little bit of a reprieve, or to cool your house down, or to give yourself a new gardening area where you can put more shade-loving plants, shade trees. And this is a really big topic, and Austin's going to be talking more about unique, underutilized trees. Today I'm going to focus on the big ones, so things that get typically above 30 feet. There's a lot of small trees that you can definitely use for shade that you could stick maybe a bench under, but I'm going to focus on 30 foot and plus. Some of these trees even get to 80 foot. And again, there's a ton of trees in here, and if y'all have any questions, feel free to let Tyler know, and he'll refer them to me, and we'll do the questions as we go in here, because there's a lot of material to cover. But I'm going to focus on a few main categories for shade trees. First thing I want to do is talk about speed, because a lot of folks, it's just, I need shade quick, I've got a bare property, and I really want something that is substantial. Maybe you want to have your lawn thrive a little bit better. Maybe you want your house to stay cooler and block that sun and really help with your cooling bills this summer. So yeah, we're going to talk about the trees for speed that'll get you there quick. The first thing that comes to mind for me for a big shade tree in Tennessee is our state tree, which is tulip poplar, liriodendron, Tennessee state tree, and we also have one out here on the lot called Little Volunteer, which is kind of cool, and it's a homage to it being our state tree. And that one actually has a small leaf, which is kind of cute, and it's also a smaller tree. Probably maybe 40 foot versus 80 foot. But our standard tulip poplars, which grow extremely fast, we're looking at 3, maybe 4 foot a year. And these tulip poplars, yeah, there you go. There's a picture with the power T there. But that's Little Volunteer, so small leaves, smaller stature, still a big tree. Great, fast-growing trees. They have a really unique bloom on them, which is almost a greenish yellow, almost looks like a part of the leaf or like a little green and orange teacup. Very distinct tree, and it'll get big quick, and I've seen these upwards of 80 foot fairly commonly. One of the only things to maybe beware of a tulip poplar is because they grow so fast, they can be brittle in old age. So tulip poplar, great tree if you just want to establish something maybe at least 30, 40 foot from your house. Wonderful, fast-growing tree, again, a Tennessee native and the Tennessee state tree, blooms, and a big wildlife and habitat tree. So that's tulip poplar, pretty popular one. Typically, we're going to carry the straight species and then some more unique ones like Little Volunteer, which is awfully cute. The second one, which is by far our most popular shade tree, is red maple, specifically autumn blaze. I actually have brandywine here, which is very similar to autumn blaze. Sorry, October glory, I'm mistaken. They all look really similar. But autumn blaze has a little bit of a bigger leaf than this, and it grows a little bit faster. So autumn blaze gets about 40 to 50 foot tall, and it'll grow easily 3 foot a year, maybe close to the 4 foot of the tulip poplar. Fire red foliage, just absolutely stunning. Very reliable fall color. This October glory has a little earlier fall color, and it's a little more on the like orangey red kind of spectrum. So there's a lot of red maples out there, and they're all a great use for a quick shade tree. Again, autumn blaze, by far our most popular. And it grows so fast, such good red fall color. I do like brandywine if you want a little bit of a smaller tree, like 30, 40 foot red maple. And October glory is more of like a 40 foot, more on the orange spectrum. So red maple, awesome, fast growing tree. Super common out here in our subdivisions and large lots because they're so easy to grow, and they really are very tolerant of difficult conditions and hot summers and cold winters. Sycamore. So that's the third one on our trees for speed, and sycamore is probably also one of the biggest one on here. Sycamore leaves, and there is an English sycamore and an American sycamore. The difference really as far as landscape use is not that much. They do have a different number of fruit that they produce. I believe it is the English one produces 2 balls of fruit, and then the American one produces 1. You might correct me on that one. It gets a little confusing with them, but they can really be used for the same purpose, whether it's the native or the European. Some people call it a plain tree. And these trees get huge, and the way that I usually recognize them is their white trunk when they get really large. A lot of times you see them next to rivers. If you've ever been tubing down a river, a lot of times this is what you see along the banks in our area. They get gray on the top, and then they get stark white on the trunk, and they'll even grow down into the water. So great shade tree, good use for stabilizing banks. If you have an erosion area or a floodplain, sycamore will really thrive in that, and it can thrive in a dry location as well. So, you know, it's fairly hardy. There are a few fungal pathogens, but typically that causes issues if you get large, like city plantings along rivers. 1 or 2 of them, they tend to live to a very old age. And like tulip poplar, they can be a little brittle. They can shed a little bit, so I wouldn't recommend one of these within 30, 40 foot of your house. But again, sycamore, awesome, long-lived tree, super fast-growing, 3, 4, maybe 5 foot a year. And that's my list for fast-growing trees. Again, that was tulip poplar, autumn blaze maple, and sycamore. I've got a nice collection of branches for y'all, so this really takes me back to school. It's very nostalgic. So, black gum. This is when we're going to talk about trees for fall color, which we'll have a little bit of overlap. Autumn blaze maple is wonderful for fall color. If you've ever had a chance to talk to me about trees out here at Bates, this is by far one of my favorites. This is a native, fast-growing shade tree called black gum, Nyssa sylvatica. And there's also a sweet gum, which is similar. I do prefer this for a few reasons. One is, this is wildfire, which produces a red tip as it grows. So you'll get a red hue to this tree from spring all the way through summer and until it starts going through fall color. Another thing I really enjoy about it is the shape. These are reliably a dense pyramid without any pruning or shaping, and a nice glossy leaf. You know, it almost even has like a evergreen kind of look to it with that glossy leaf. So black gum is one of my favorite trees for fall color. Yeah, there's a picture of a 15-gallon, fairly quick growing trees, about 3 to 4 foot a year, red tips on it, and the fall color is red, yellow, orange, green, all at the same time, so I'll call it like a kaleidoscope of color. Awesome tree. Very tolerant of wet areas and very tolerant of dry areas. So awesome native that is pretty much trouble-free. Black gum, specifically wildfire, because you get that spring and summer color. I do have sweet gum on here. Oh, I think I have sweet gum. Let's see. Yeah, so I do have sweet gum. Very distinct because of its star-shaped leaf. It has a very similar growth habit to black gum. These do have a tendency for the large shade ones to produce these little spiky fruit, which can be kind of undesirable. So just something to be aware of. If you have a naturalized area, sweet gum is amazing as well. We do sell a lot of the columnar silhouette sweet gums, but sweet gum, black gum, both great shade native trees for fall color. Sweet gum will be a nice solid yellow. Red maple, which I already touched on. For fall color, again, a little bit of overlap. This is October Glory, kind of my favorite because I like that kind of like burnished orange in the fall. Autumn Blaze, if you're going for fire red, Autumn Blaze is definitely the ticket. And then like something like Brandywine or Summer Red will have more of like a purpley red hue with a smaller leaf. So there's a lot of options for red maple. And, you know, if you want to kind of look at all those options, a little confusing, come on out to Bates. We'll kind of help you out. Again, that's Autumn Blaze I'm looking at. A bigger, more deeply serrated leaf, and definitely our fastest grower with great fall color. 40, 50 foot on these guys. Ginkgo. And I actually neglected to get a leaf of the very distinct ginkgo for y'all. And so in lieu of that, I do have a little tree book here Which, if you're getting into like trees, and there's a lot of cool stuff, there's tons of books out there for identifying. This is one of Michael Durr's book, and he's more of a general landscape. But this is ginkgo tree. Most folks are fairly familiar with the fall color of our autumn gold ginkgo, which will be right here next to my finger. And then you can kind of see those distinct leaves, which are very, fossil looking, and in fact they are in the fossil records. So these are plants that have been around since dinosaurs, which is always kind of a cool story behind them. But an awesome fall color tree. Ginkgo is known not only for that leaf, but also to be very tough. I mean, they can deal with lots of pollution, lots of poor soil, because they've lived for so long. We only sell male varieties here at Bates Nursery. That means they're not going to produce the fruit, which, kind of like the sweet gum, is a little bit undesirable. It smells kind of rancid. So we only sell male ginkgos here at Bates. So if you get one from us, it should not produce that stinky fruit. But ginkgos, awesome trees, have a very unique growth habit, and their fall color, they'll just turn yellow, and then all of a sudden, at a certain point, all those leaves will just drop to the ground all at once, and you get this beautiful yellow carpet underneath a ginkgo tree, and that's a very distinct look to those trees. So awesome in the fall, and I mean, very nostalgic for people. A lot of people plant it as like a memorial tree, just because of their history and longevity. So that's ginkgo biloba, and that's the last of my fall color trees. So black gum, like I said, number one for me for fall color. It is just a rainbow kaleidoscope of color in the fall. Red maple, autumn blaze, or October glory, brandywine, some of my favorites. And then ginkgo. So if you want that like solid, bright duck yellow color in the fall, and then that nice layout of leaves with a very distinct branching pattern, ginkgo is a really special tree for fall color and for winter interest as well. Okay, next category. Native trees. And I've already gone through a few native trees. I'm going to go through a few shade native trees, which may be a little underutilized, or something that folks want to know a little more about. And the big one, I think, is oak trees. And there are a ton of native oaks out there, and they can be kind of difficult to differentiate and identify. But oak trees, when you're talking a tree that's going to live for a century or more, oak tree definitely fits on that list up there with like ginkgo. Oak trees, and there's so many different types of oaks. A lot of folks are familiar with pin oaks and red oaks, which are fairly common in our landscape. But we also have things like swamp white oak, which I think is one of my favorite oaks, not only for the size and the pyramidal shape of the oak, but it also has a very distinct bark, and they get this really nice peeling bark. Sometimes it almost turns white like a sycamore. So swamp white oak is a really great option for an oak tree, even though there's a lot and they're all very similar. I have some bur oak, which is something that we have a few out there on the lot. Bur oak has a very distinct looking leaf. Neat thing about the bur oak is this really fissured bark that's actually soft like cork. So it's a very unique tree, very tactile. And all of these oak trees really can get upwards of 70, 80 foot even. Some of them may stay a little bit smaller, but typically we're looking in this 50, 60 foot range. A little slower than some shade trees, 2, maybe 3 foot a year. To me, I still consider that fairly quick. Most all of them will produce acorns. So whether that kind of informs you to go for an oak or not for an oak. If you're a proponent of wildlife, critters, squirrels, deer, all that sort of stuff, it's a great habitat plant. But then again, the acorns can be a little messy. So I'd recommend these maybe 40, 50 foot from your house so you can enjoy them. We've got a wonderful red oak about 40 foot from our house, and that fall color on the red oak is amazing. So if you want some nice red color on an oak, a red oak's a great option. Most oaks are going to be in the kind of yellowish fall color, so not the best for fall color. But if you're looking for a tree that can live on for a very long time and establish a piece of property, an oak is a very noble and majestic tree. The Bates Nursery property has a giant willow oak actually above the Bates residence off property here. That tree has got to be 50, 60 foot tall and just as wide. So willow oak, another awesome oak tree with a very fine textured leaf. Willow oak is great if you're going to have to mow and mulch the leaves because it's easy to mow. So, and again, if you need to know about more oaks, come and talk to us. There's a lot of options, and there's not necessarily a bad oak, just kind of something that's a little more nuanced as to what you want. So oak tree, awesome native tree. We could probably do a whole webinar on that. If that's something y'all want to see, let us know. Honey locust. So this, I think, is a very underutilized plant for texture. It's very similar to, say, mimosa, which a lot of folks are familiar with. But this is honey locust, which is a native shade tree. The ones out in our landscape, whether it's honey locust or black locust, produce big, large bean pods. A lot of these we sell won't produce a lot of that fruit. Some of them will, but most of them won't. And there's a few different varieties. What I like about the honey locust is that it grows fairly quick, and it is very heat tolerant and very tolerant of kind of a poor soil location. And the texture, I mean, this texture, just like a mimosa, looks almost tropical. It's very fern-like, and they fill in really quickly in that canopy, and they give you this nice kind of diffuse shade. So really cool texture. When these blow in the wind, you can almost hear them. So a locust tree, so there's one, and you'll notice I'm looking up a lot with these trees because that's kind of how we figure out where they are, is we look up and look for those leaves and see what they look like. But a very distinct branching structure. These things will grow 3-4 foot a year without a whole lot of fuss or anything. So locust trees, awesome tree for a native texture that's not used a lot. Like I said, the shade they cast is really cool. Just like a mimosa tree, you'll kind of see the movement of the shade in the grass, and it's really kind of a neat effect to add to your native garden. A lot of these are bred to go kind of tall and branch high, like Skyline honey locust. I think there's another one called Street Keeper, and these are also thornless as far as what we sell. The ones you'll find in the wild will have nasty 3-inch thorns on them, which is kind of cool to look at, but not so great for our home gardens. So honey locust, the genus is Gleditsia, a very unique genus, but that's definitely high on my list. I've got one out in our field right now, and it has done great for the dry couple weeks we've had with minimal soaking. So honey locust, awesome tree for texture. And then black gum, sweet gum was kind of the last on my native list. And we've already kind of talked about those. I'll pull out the sweet gum again. Great native trees, very, very tolerant. I mean, these things, the sweet gum slender silhouette grows all around in like concrete parking lots in the middle of the islands, and I see them thriving there. So sweet gum, easy tree. Black gum, if I can find it, another really great native tree. And of course, anything native is potentially a habitat. We have a lot of critters and moths and caterpillars and birds that really hone in on these trees versus other non-native trees you can put in your landscape. So there's always a benefit to a native. They're very resilient. They seem to deal with our kind of weather fluctuations we have in Middle Tennessee fairly well. So black gum, definitely. And then sweet gum, just knowing that the big ones will produce the fruit, but great native habitat plants. And this one's Wildfire. Definitely one of my top picks. And I'll probably have another native or two in my second list. So that's our native list. I talked about oaks in general. Honey locust trees or black locust. We typically don't carry black locust, but honey locust trees. And then the black gums or the sweet gums. The gum trees, great native shade trees, large trees with a majestic, noble appearance, and just something you can feel good about sticking in your yard. The last little small category I have for y'all is unique shade trees, because, sometimes we need something different, even though we want it to be big and functional as a shade tree. One of my top ones is linden tree, and I've got a couple here. And there's 3 main species of linden we deal with here, but linden tree is just a really nice, again, like I said, the word noble. It's just a very nice shaped tree with a really handsome, very clean leaf on it. Some people know this as basswood. So this is Tilia americana, the native one with a bigger leaf. This is actually off one that I believe is called American Sentinel, if I'm not mistaken, which doesn't get quite as wide because these trees are known to get 40, 50 foot tall, maybe just as wide. So the American Century will get a little bit narrower than that. Awesome leaf, and one of my favorite parts about these linden trees is just this fruiting structure they have is so unique. They throw on this kind of little modified leaf, and then the blooms, which on this one are just starting to open up, haven't quite opened up, but a very unique look, and they kind of hang down from the branches. Very tough and sturdy tree. Again, this is Tilia americana, American linden, a little more common in the landscape. This is actually tomentosa, so this is silver linden. There's also a little leaf linden, Tilia cordata. They're all great trees. This one has a nice silver color underneath it. And so when you see that in the wind, you can see that silver, and you can almost identify these from a long ways away. So this is Tilia tomentosa, the silver linden. And the other really, really great unique aspect to these trees is the fragrance. You know, I wish we had smell-o-vision because this is like honeysuckle times 10. It is a very, very intense perfumey fragrance. My neighbor has one about a football field away, and when I'm walking past it, it just almost makes your head spin how fragrant it is. Huge for pollinators, honeybees, that kind of thing. I mean, these things load up because of how high that scent is, and that pollen in there is pretty intense. So very awesome. We don't get a lot of large trees. Yeah, so there's the American Sentinel. It grows very vertical. Awesome, sturdy trees, and something that can live a very, very long time, and they have a very nice structure to them, very pyramidal, and that fragrance is just kind of sugar on top for these trees. So this is linden, awesome tree. I'd say underutilized, but you do see them in commercial plantings, city plantings and stuff quite a bit, which means they can take a tough environment. So linden trees, awesome little tree. Something you could definitely add to your yard without any regrets at all. Bald cypress and dawn redwood. So I had to get into these conifer-like shade trees. You know, I can't leave these out. These are not evergreens, but they are coniferous, meaning they have needles. So this is bald cypress, and I'm kind of grouping these together, even though bald cypress is native and dawn redwood is an Asian origin plant. They have a very similar texture, similar shape, and very similar use. So this is bald cypress. And this one's actually Mickelson, identified by these really tight, small needles on them. But such a graceful plant. And whenever the wind blows, these things just move freely. It's got a very airy, relaxing appeal when these things are fully out in the summer. And they're also very tolerant of, you know, bald cypress. Folks may think of the cypress knees that you get down in the swamps down in Florida and places like that. And this is the same cypress. It won't do that in your garden bed unless you have a wet area, because they use those knees as kind of like a snorkel to breathe. But that means this plant can take a really wet, waterlogged spot, which tends to happen here in our low places. It can also take a not so wet spot and do just fine. So bald cypress, awesome tree. These will get upwards of 70 foot. And to me, the fall color is really nice. It's almost like a solid copper cloud in the fall. So awesome tree for fall color. But dawn redwood, it's kind of Asian cousin. The dawn redwood has a coarser texture, but the fall color on this is like yellow. It is really nice. Some of them get almost a yellow-orange depending on the variety. But dawn redwood, you know, same genus as our giant redwoods out on the west coast. These things can get big. I mean, we're looking 70, 80 foot, just like the bald cypress. A little bit of a different texture, but same use. These things are rugged. They can take a dry spot, a wet spot, or any of the above. And again, main thing for me with the uniqueness of these trees is the texture. And it's just so airy, and when you get wind blowing and you're sitting out there in your landscape and just looking at this tree or sitting under the tree, it's just such an amazing experience to have these fronds just moving all at once. Really awesome tree. I don't know if they're underplanted. They're fairly popular, actually, because they grow quick. You can get a big tree for a great price because of how fast they grow. So maybe I should have put it up there with the trees for speed, but you know, a lot of these could cross over. So that's the bulk of my trees. Oops, sorry. Spoke too soon. One more for y'all. which is also a native crossover. This is one that's really fragrant right now. I can smell it. This is Sweet Bay Magnolia. You know, I kind of debated to put this in here because they don't get as big as the others, but they make a great quick shade tree. So Sweet Bay Magnolia, this is our native magnolia, which is semi-evergreen. So in a mild winter, they'll hold on to most of their leaves. In a hard winter, they'll shed their leaves and then push them back in the spring. But the Sweet Bay Magnolia has a nice, small, honey-scented, sweet bloom, kind of like our southern evergreen magnolia. The great thing is this thing is a habitat plant. So this is habitat for swallowtail butterflies and the other number of our native insect species. And it is fast. We're looking at 3, 4, maybe 5 foot a year if it's in a moist spot. And these things will get 30 to 40 foot. So not as big as the rest of them we talked about, but quick. And I think it's really nice for an almost tropical look. I mean, they look like a very tropical tree, and they do grow further south in the tropics, but they give you that sense of almost evergreen, but they form a canopy like our southern magnolia doesn't. So really cool. You could easily have a sitting area or a table under these fairly quickly. I love the silver on the back of the leaf, so when the wind blows on the Sweet Bay Magnolia, you get this really nice kind of color change on them. And very distinct. We get multi-trunk ones, we get single-trunk ones, but a great underutilized native plant. It really can thrive in a moist location. It's okay if it's got a little bit of a drier spot, water it for the first few years, but Sweet Bay Magnolia, kind of a final honorable mention as a great, quick shade tree for y'all. So that is actually what I have for y'all as far as shade trees. And, you know, if y'all have any questions, you know, let us know now or come in debates, and we would love to help you out, answer your questions, nerd out over trees, whatever y'all want to do, you know, tree and shrub related. We would love for you to come out and spend some time with us.
I'm not seeing any questions out there, Ben. So,
and I know we're just getting back into the webinars. I know this will be on YouTube eventually for access if y'all want to reference it. And like I said, just keep us up to date. If y'all have any questions or want to follow up on this webinar, just message us on any of our accounts, and we'd love to hear from you.